welcome everyone who is joining us via Zoom. We are happy to say we have about 95 people who are registered for the actual Zoom meeting. And we're also live streaming this on YouTube. This is our 2021 annual meeting. The theme for this year is serving the sector in the service of community. And we're hopeful that you will join us and walk with us as we talk to you about what that means to us. Just real quickly before we get started, just some housekeeping items. This meeting is being recorded again and is being live streamed on YouTube. A recording will be available on YouTube, our YouTube channel, after the session concludes. Because it is a webinar format, all attendees are muted and video is disabled for the duration of the meeting. And while we don't anticipate having time during the packed agenda to take questions, please, if you have something burning that you want us to consider, use the chat feature to submit those. And our intent is to get back to you post the meeting in the coming days to answer those questions. Really quickly, we're going to go through the agenda, which I want to first say thank you to all of my staff and participating guests and board members who helped put this together. Once I am done, we're going to have a welcome from our chair, Jeff Fleischer, who's going to welcome you with some remarks and introduce our guest speaker, which we are still hoping will join us very shortly. Then we will have some opening remarks from our guest speaker. Then we're going to come back together, you and I, and I'll talk a little bit about our strategic priorities. And give you kind of an overview. And that will be in the form of kind of taking a look back at where we've been, where we are now, and hopefully talk about where we're going forward. To give some more color and context to all of those things, we have, again, some of our organizational leaders that from our board who are going to give some more details to our strategic priorities. After that, we're going to have a special acknowledgement of a very important and valuable contributor to our work thus far. And then at the end, I will come back before you with some closing remarks about where we're headed. We do expect to end on time at 2 o'clock. So please sit back and enjoy yourself. We have a lot of ground to cover, but we think that it will be extremely informative, both for all of you who are currently associated and connected with the Assembly, but also for some of you who are leaders in the sector who might want to join us as we move forward. So at this point, I will introduce the NHSA Board Chair, Jeff Fleischer, who's going to give you some opening remarks.
Thanks so much, Vic, and thank you, everyone, and especially for joining us during these really trying and challenging times for the human service sector and for really all of us these days. So thank you for the time, and we really have a really good presentation. We're still waiting for the Secretary to join us, but the Assembly, just for those that are new to us, is a 97-year-old membership and advocacy organization, and we're working to advance the collective power, knowledge, and strategy for systems change that builds well-being with individuals and communities. We're comprised of some of the largest national nonprofit human service organizations in the United States, and our committed, dedicated, and accomplished board of directors, and our new experienced executive director, and our talented staff are really committed to promoting equity and racial justice within our human service sector. We do this in 4 ways, as we're waiting for the Secretary, but we're conveners. We're convening the sector to share knowledge and resources and to work together on equity issues. We're providing tools and processes to promote diversity within our organizations, particularly regarding our boards of directors and our senior staff. We're supporting the sector to really provide our services and support and build our communities with equity at the center. And lastly, we facilitate our collective purchasing power to save dollars that can be redirected towards our mission. So the next thing I was going to do is to introduce the speaker. So with that, or do we go to Vic?
What we'll do is we'll just keep rolling. When he comes in, I will give it back to you, Jeff, and we'll just break in when we can break in.
Thank you so much.
And I see the Secretary is on.
Boom.
Oh, great.
Great. Well, welcome, Secretary. We're just about to introduce you. for your opening remarks. I just gave my opening remarks, but Secretary Becerra, 25th Secretary of Health and Human Services. He was also Attorney General of California, 2017 to 21, a member of the House of Representatives from 1993 to 2017, representing downtown Los Angeles. He was the chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus from 97 to 99. Interesting, he began his career as a lawyer working on cases involving individuals who have behavioral health issues for the Legal Assistance Corporation of Central Massachusetts. He's also known for fighting for women's health issues. So there's no more fitting speaker to launch our new initiative on equity than the Secretary. So we really like to introduce you. As we all know, HHS is one of the biggest funders and drivers of what we do in the human service sector. We're really, really excited to have you with us and your new appointment. So I'll hand it over to you, and thank you.
Jeff, thank you, and to Victor as well. Appreciate that I'm able to talk to the National Human Services Assembly. I think my internet service is not that great, so I hope I'm not breaking up. But in the event that I am, know that I've got great remarks to give, and you can move on knowing that. I'm going to be brief because I know you've got an agenda, and I know the work you do, and I so much appreciate it. Really, what I want to say is thank you. And not just thank you as Secretary of Health and Human Services for everything you're doing and have done, but thank you for having been there for me and my family when I was growing up. And thank you for doing the work that we need to see everywhere I've been, whether it was my first job representing folks who were mentally challenged and needed the assistance, legal assistance of someone through legal services to help them, or whether it's now as secretary. I've always, I can go down the list of organizations that are part of this assembly, and I've always had a great partnership. And so thank you for just always being there. And I say that personally as much as professionally. Second, what I'd like to say is that we obviously are not done. And here's where I think we're going to make some beautiful music together. We saw through COVID where we need to go. The gaps in our system were fully exposed. Now, for many of us, we were aware of those gaps and have been aware of them for the longest time. But this time they were there for all of America to see how in the richest, most dynamic country in the world, we still were not reaching everyone in America, that we still were leaving people behind. And so we have work to do because we know where we have to go. We know how to do it. We've been doing it for a long time. It's now the effort has to be more intense because on COVID, Delta's not going to give up. And if it's not Delta, it could be Epsilon next. When it comes to behavioral health, we know that COVID has exacerbated the situation for so many people, including our youth, who are now in need of help and support. We know that we have to do more when it comes to letting parents go back fully to work with childcare. We know we have work to do in addressing all forms of substance use disorder, not just opioids. And so we have a ton to do. The great thing is you all are the experts that know how to do it. And you're far more nimble than we are in government. And so you get to lead and help us get there. So that thank you that I said has an exclamation point at the end of it. And we are very much looking forward to working with you. I was fortunate to see from experience, whether as a member of Congress or whether it was as Attorney General or whether as a kid growing up, people who provided me with the role models I needed to see to know how to do things. And here's one thing I learned from someone who was a great role model, a dear friend, and a colleague for 24 years. John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis, who sadly passed recently, used to tell us in the Democratic caucus in the House, we got to fight and we just can't give up. We have to go at it. But the way he would say it is, look, you just got to get in the way. And I think all of us understand that these gaps we see in America require us to get in the way, to say no more can we allow those pockets of our communities to be left behind. And he would say, it's easy to get in the way. You just got to get into trouble, good trouble. And so you all have been getting into good trouble for a long time. And so it's just a matter of continuing to do that. And so I want to help you get into good trouble. President Biden wants to help you get into good trouble. If we can follow up the American Rescue Plan, which has done so much already to help us move the dial, with the American Family Plan, as it now works its way through the Congress, wow, get ready, because you need to get in the way and get into that good trouble, because I'm going to have resources to give you the propulsion to get in trouble. And that's what we want to see you do, is get in trouble, because as you go there, we're going to be right with you. We are going to be right with you. And so I don't know how better to communicate this than just say, I have told the team at HHS, at least while I have the privilege to serve as secretary, that I want them to think about essentially two things. Accountability. I want to make sure that we can say to folks, at least under our watch, we deliver, whether it's healthcare or human services. And one of the things I said when I first was nominated was, I'm going to put the capital H back into that second H in HHS, human services, because it's so important. And so I will tell you, as we move forward to figure out how to make all of this happen, if we're fortunate to get the American Families Plan out, is to say, do not be shy. As I learned from a gentleman who was in marketing, who used to say, I always tell my clients, never do mild. You want to market a product, never do mild. Go out there as if you got to take the whole territory. I say to you, never do mild. Go out there and capture the imagination, the heart and mind of people who are out there who say, America cannot do this poorly when it comes to addressing COVID. We cannot continue to see people not get vaccinated. We're going to do all this stuff together. So whether it's continuing to improve on the nearly 70% of Americans who are now getting that first shot and now getting fully vaccinated, whether it is dealing with those suicidal thoughts that too many of our teens are now having, whether it's dealing with the disparities in the way we treat our brothers and sisters throughout America, whether it is making sure that everyone has access to quality health care, regardless of their age or their zip code, we cannot do mild. And so let us move forward. Dylan Thomas, a poet of the past, he died a long time ago. And like all these creative people, he died a tragic life. He wrote a poem which he left untitled. Many of you probably would recognize it if you heard it. The first stanza in that poem runs, do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage until the dying of the light. Most people think he wrote that poem for his father, who was ill and seemed to be moving towards death. And it was essentially a signal, fight, don't give up. You all have been doing that. That's what your trademark is. So when I say to you, do not go gently into that good night, rage, rage, for all those people who got left behind. For those mothers who are trying to figure out how to take care of their child without the money to buy the groceries. For that young person who just doesn't believe anyone cares about him or her. For those seniors who would love to have access to the vaccine, but they're in rural parts of America that are always left behind and they don't know how to get there. Rage, rage. Let's do this together, because for the first time in perhaps a generation since LBJ, we actually may have the propulsion, the resources to do this, because President Biden has made it very clear he's in a fight to get us what we need. And so do not go gentle into that good night. And know that as you fight and as you get in the way and get into that good trouble, HHS, the entire team, we are there with you. And so thank you for this chance to join you today. Thank you for everything you do. But I'll close, as I said before. Most importantly, I wish to say a personal thanks to all of you who didn't know me, didn't know this kid, the son of immigrant parents, first in his family to have a chance to go to college, a father who got to the 6th grade, had to work in road construction, farm work. Mother who didn't come to this country till she was 18 when she married my father, came from Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico. Rage, because there are people like me who get to stand with you today and fight because you did it and you're doing it. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for letting us be a partner. Let's get into good trouble. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Secretary. Really comforting and beautiful and inspiring remarks. And we really appreciate you being with us. And we will rage. We will be your partners as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vic?
Sure. So again, let me follow that with, I mean, that's very hard to follow, but I really can appreciate getting into that good trouble that the secretary was talking about. And I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the good trouble that the Assembly has been getting in since I've had the privilege of coming on board April of this year. So my remarks are going to be kind of couched in a few ways. I want to talk a little bit about our strategic priorities, but in the context of the Assembly yesterday and today. And you'll hear us transpose our organization's name. Sometimes you'll hear NHSA and sometimes you'll hear the Assembly, but they are absolutely one and the same. Let me talk a little bit, Jeff mentioned already, about our history, but I want to kind of talk about what the vision is. When you take a position like I've taken, a lot of times people ask you, the first thing they want to ask you is, what's the organization's vision? What's your vision for moving the organization forward? And I like to look at that not as obviously an I challenge, but a we challenge. And leadership in the context of how are we going to quote unquote show up? And I believe that the Assembly has the ability to serve the sector in this service to the community, getting in that good trouble, being disruptors, getting in the way through multiple ways. I do believe that we need to be, as Jeff mentioned, a convener and a collaborator. We should be a backbone organization. I'm a student of collective impact and organizations coming together with a shared vision, shared goals, and looking at the best ways for us to do community work. I believe we need to focus on impact. And as the secretary mentioned, now is the time. Immediacy is extremely critical because we do have some of the more nationally known and prominent organizations. There are times when we need to be vocal and visible. But there are other times that we need to support those who they themselves have been doing this work in other areas and other places and other spaces. When you're talking about race equity, when you're talking about the challenges that that people of low economic status might be facing, whatever those life barriers may be, there are so many of you who are even joining us today who have been out front. We want to stand with you, stand behind you, amplify your voice when we can. Again, as a convener and a collaborator, we're going to leverage our resources in the service of you as you help those communities. We have to be innovative and inspirational at the same time. I think that one of the mandates that we have, look, I would have loved to have come before you today in person. But due to the challenges of COVID, that's not possible. Looking forward to one day being able to greet and meet and shake every last one of your hands. But we have to now be innovators in how we're delivering our services, how we're communicating across agencies, the use of technology, pushing the envelope. And getting to areas and places where people may not already be connected. And so it's important that we're able to find new ways to connect. But when we do, we have to understand those audiences that we're speaking to and be inspirations to them. I was extremely touched by what the secretary just said, because he brought it home to something very personal. It's not just about our organizations and who we are. I mean, what COVID has taught us and what the virtual settings have taught us is that we're all coming from the comfort of our homes. And so the trappings of title and the trappings of who we might have been, they're falling apart, and they're falling by the wayside. So it's really about being more personal. and our touch. At the end of the day, we want to be at the Assembly champions of humanity through our services. As we help to support those organizations in our membership and our partners and our stakeholders, leadership through service leadership, but ultimately bringing back the humanity in human services is where we are striving. And we've got a lot of work to do, and we need as much help as we can get. So Jeff gave a brief background. One thing I am excited to say that I come aboard as we're approaching our centennial, really looking forward to being able to have some events and opportunities to communicate and commune with many of the people and many of the organizations who were there at the very beginning, but also those who join us in the next 100 years. When we were started, it was about having a better understanding and closer cooperation between agencies. We understand that we have a lot of large agencies that are associated with the Assembly, and we want to do more in the way of how do we bridge that communication gap between those who have larger budgets and those who may have mid to smaller budgets, because it takes all of us to move an agenda forward. Those national organizations that have localities, that it's about what's happening on the ground. They always said all politics is local. Well, so are services, and we need to think in the same vein. We want to have solutions to the social problems of our time. We want to have actionable plans that meet the needs of both the organizations and the people. When it comes down to it, despite all of us, it's about, at the end of it, who are the people that we're serving? How are we making a positive impact in families, in the lives of youth, in urban areas, in rural areas, in suburban areas? And then we want to have strategies ultimately for developing effective programs and operations. We consider ourselves in the business also of capacity building. If you don't have the resources and you don't have the infrastructure, if you don't have the people, and you're going to hear a little bit more about our work around, the people and supporting the people, then it's just going to be very difficult. And we know that through all of the years that many of us have been working in this field. So that's kind of a look back. I can tell you a little bit. I'm not going to go through all of these bullet points, but just some highlights in these slides will be available, obviously, through the recording. But part of the work that we're doing is becoming more and being more of a collaborator and partner. I'm happy to report, though we've not taken physical occupation of this space yet, but looking very forward to it, that we recently moved to our new headquarters. As a result of a phenomenal partnership with the National Alliance for Hispanic Health. We're going to be co-locating there with the goal of being able to do a better job and more real-time cross-pollination of practices and policies, so that we can be a lot more responsive to the varying communities that we want to help serve. Obviously, I mentioned in April, I came aboard as a new executive director with a mandate, I would say, and a wonderful mandate to oversee the strategic direction of this organization as we look to, one, celebrate what we've done in the past, be relevant today, and have a actionable future, programs and opportunities for the future. From a very practical standpoint, we've restructured our operations in the few months that I've been here. We want to provide more support to our current members, again, in that capacity building space. And we want to build the bigger tent, as I would say, and open up our membership and our opportunities, whether it be through our learning series, whether it be through our convenings, whether it be through our policy strategies, for more organizations who are not quite represented today, but we want to be able to represent tomorrow. From a financial standpoint, look, it's always important that stability is important. It is key. I am happy to say that this year so far, we're 20% over budget. We've increased our program revenue over our yearly projections. And again, when I say innovative, we've really moved towards a fully automated financial operation. It's necessary. We're not, we don't have physical space the way that we used to. There's always going to be a little bit of trouble with mail and things of that nature. And so we're encouraging, not through being a leader and being an example, we're encouraging the use of technology. It's out there. There are companies who for years have been moving billions of dollars across the sea. And they're able to do that with a push of a button, and so shall we. I mentioned that's from a strategic planning standpoint. We have had conversations in June, particularly about our top priorities, and you're going to hear a little bit more detail about that, and Jeff already mentioned those. Communications wise, I believe that you have to have multiple things in place in order to translate meaning. We have to be the right messenger. And so again, are we the leader in something? Are we the supporter in something? Are we the backbone in something? Understanding who we are and our audiences. We have to have the right message. We have to know what the timing is, and we need to know the tone in which people are receiving information that ultimately moves them to act. And the medium we chose are through our, in particular, our 2 electronic newsletters. You see a brief snapshot of what they look like. We have actually redesigned them. The exchange newsletter is now one that's going to feature more of what our partners and our members and our leaders are doing, as well as always keeping in front of you what's happening in our strategic priorities. Our Purchasing Point newsletter, and you'll hear a little bit more about the Purchasing Point program very shortly. We're saving money for mission. We're now putting our money where our mouth is, and and taking that foot forward. If we're talking about, we want to be about race, diversity, equity, and inclusion, we want to highlight those organizations, those companies that are providing goods and services that are diverse in nature, whether led by people of diverse backgrounds or have a history of serving many people in those same communities. Ultimately, you have to help people sustain and build if you're really going to be a champion and an advocate for diversity. I mentioned, we have redesigned our programming to do more in the area of membership engagement. We have relaunched our learning series. We've just completed our annual compensation survey because it's important to understand where we are as an employer of choice. We do contribute a great deal to this nation's economic foundation, both as employers and as organizations that are helping families and people move through the economic continuum. Our learning series is rooted and grounded in our core policy and issue areas. In June, we had I believe it was our third in a series of 4, Unlocked, Investing in Our Children and Communities. In July, we did a convening around leadership models for race, equity, impact. Because of who we are, we, again, can't be everything to everybody. We know that in the race equity space, we have the leverage to speak in terms of how do we change the face of leadership in our associations and our organizations and our nonprofits to better reflect those who are being served and who are being impacted by those. Obviously, today we've had the wonderful secretary speak to us as part of our annual meeting. In October, we're planning to talk about succession planning in the human services arena. Many people, for various reasons, are moving out of the sector, but where is that bench at? Where are we going to find the next pool of great leaders that we can hand the torch to? And in November, again, show me your priorities by showing me your finances and your resources. We want to know where the state of philanthropy is. And so we're looking forward to having conversations that are very important to many of the people who are paying attention to this. From a public policy standpoint, again, we're planting our flag in areas of supporting the sector. What are the resources that can help build infrastructure? We're very rooted and grounded in the juvenile justice system conversations, particularly for community-based continuums of care for youth diversion. We want our young people to come home, even when they make mistakes. Because that's where they get the most support from their family and their communities. We're looking at how to gain resources. We have a once in a lifetime, once in a generation opportunity with the American Rescue Plan. And you're going to hear some of that later on about where you can get in, where you fit in, so to speak, and where some of those resources can be obtained. There are, we, as the Secretary mentioned, we have a unique opportunity because the resources are there. We're always constantly looking again at are we good places for people to come spend their careers, because ultimately if you're able to thrive and support yourself working on the foundations that many of our organizations have, then you get to sleep at night because what we're doing is good work. That's a double benefit. And of course, again, how do we navigate the sometimes very difficult areas of federal funding? And so we're there to help and to find ways and to bring people together to talk about these and many other issues. So I want to turn it over to my colleague, Ruth Sigei, who is the managing director of our PurchasingPoint program. Again, one of the things that we do is we provide a service to nonprofit and human service sector organizations to help them purchase in bulk and purchase together in a collaborative space that ultimately helps them, again, save money for mission. But Ruth is going to talk to you about what the program is, and how well it's been doing. And hopefully after hearing some of that, maybe some of you will want more information and sign up. So Ruth, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Victor. That was great. Thank you for highlighting the impact of the National Assembly. And yes, we are putting our money where our mouth is. It's good to see all of you. I will be giving an overview of the PurchasingPoint program and highlight some of the benefits to our members. I'll begin with a brief history of the program. In 2001, the National Human Services Assembly began discussions with Health Trust Purchasing Group to provide another value add to our nonprofit members and strengthen the sector by offering the PurchasingPoint program. We like to consider ourselves the go-to group purchasing organization for nonprofits. Through the program, we leverage group buying power of $45 billion annually through our partnership with Health Trust Purchasing Group, our partner. So because of the $45 billion, they go out there and negotiate really aggressive pricing with national vendors. The goal of the program, again, is to save nonprofits money for mission. We like to say around here, it's easier to save money than it is to raise it. And I'm sure many of you can agree with that. A great thing about the program is that there is no tiered pricing. So regardless of your size, operational budget, we're all seeing the great discounted pricing, same for all nonprofits. I get this question all the time. The smaller nonprofits will say, we're so small, can we see savings through the program? And the answer is always absolutely. A key benefit of the program as well is that we provide simple ways to increase diversity in your purchasing. And we're helping our nonprofit members advance their supplier diversity goals and strengthen the sector. We make sure we're very proactive in promoting and encouraging purchasing with certified minority, women-owned, service-disabled, and veteran business enterprises. We do this by offering webinars and featuring supplier diversity in our communication. If you log on to our portal, you'll find a section there that highlights supplier diversity. So if you're looking for vendors that fall within this category, you will find that as well on our website. The program has had great success. So since its inception, this is a number that we're very proud of. We've been able to save our nonprofit members an estimated $212 million in savings. And this is money that's being redirected back towards mission-related activities and improving the well-being of our local communities across the nation. We currently have over 8,000 nonprofits of different sizes utilizing the program. As I mentioned before, regardless of your budget, as long as you utilize the vendors in the program, you will see some type of savings. The purchasing currently is up to 755 million from across over 100 national vendors. So this slide, this is how it looks like for PurchasingPoint, but we can customize this for each of our members and show what the savings would look like and how many of users are in that particular network and how many active locations as well. This is absolutely not an inclusive list of our vendors, but this is a sample of some of the vendors that we do see. We do offer vendors that serve almost every operational need that you may have. We get asked, what's the savings? What kind of savings do I see with the program? The average savings with vendors in the program ranges from 15 to 30% and sometimes higher, depending on the vendors that you utilize. From the list here, you can see we have several vendor categories. We have technology, office equipment, facility management. If you're looking for background screening, facility management, food supplies. So you can see you have a lot of the vendors that you recognize, national vendors, local vendors. And we also offer, with all these webinars, with all these vendors, we offer vendor webinars and highlight new vendors in our bi-weekly newsletters. A great thing with the program as well is that if you are looking for a particular vendor, we are available to help you assist in finding a product or service that you may need. We also have select vendors that offer additional perks like employee discounts. We get a lot of requests for employee discounts. Not all the vendors offer employee discounts, but these can be passed along to your staff. Some of the vendors that offer employee discounts are the car rental, which is very popular, Staples as well. And during the pandemic, the program was very beneficial to our members. The program proved to be a one-stop shop, offering many of the products that our members and the sector needed to be able to reopen and continue business in a safe and healthy manner. For example, many of our members used Staples for PPE and Grainger, for building supplies, Johnson Controls. And the vendors in the program continue to provide tools and technology to help us adapt to working remotely. So if you're working remotely, you're still in need of PPE, please reach out to us. We can connect you with vendors in the program that are offering products that are in stock and at really great pricing. So this is basically an overview of the program. If you have any questions, please reach out. My contact information is provided. Also, go to our website, www.purchasingpoint.org. That is simply a portal, a conduit through which you sign up for the program and can be able to see all the additional information about the program. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ruth. I appreciate that. Again, that's very exciting. Those are real dollars going back into organizations. Again, more money for mission, and you are 100% right. Sometimes it's just easier to save than it is to raise, especially as portfolios are changing from funders and resources are being diverted in ways that may not have been traditionally done. So again, thank you for that. That's very exciting. So we're going to talk a little bit more about one of our other main strategic areas, which is racial equity and diversity in leadership. And I'm very happy, very excited to have Monisha Kapila, who is the founder and co-CEO of ProInspire. But more important than that, is really a leader, a thought leader. It's someone who I've actually learned and leaned on in the few months that I've been here. She is a board member, so she's someone who takes leadership by storm, as well as understanding best practices in those areas. So I'm going to give it over to Monisha. She's going to talk about what some of the issues are in diversification of leadership, but also a little bit about what our thoughts and what we're doing in the space. So Monisha.
Thank you, Victor. It's really great to be with all of you today. And I'm so excited that this is a strategic priority for the National Human Services Assembly. I've been engaged with the Assembly for about 10 years, since ProInspire's early days as a nonprofit that's focused on supporting leaders at all levels to accelerate equity. And we began working with the National Human Services Assembly within just a few years of our founding. And I know from engaging with the Human Resources Council and the DEI councils and many Assembly members, this has been a very big priority. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the research that we're finding through work with human services and other nonprofits, as well as what we recently shared in a webinar for the Assembly members last month. So this is new research that ProInspire has been working on, leadership practices for race equity. And it starts with kind of our foundational beliefs that it's essential for leaders at all levels in the social sector to focus on race equity. This actually came from, ProInspire had been doing work around leadership, diversity, and talent pipelines for many years. And we realized that until we were actually prioritizing race equity as part of leadership, we weren't going to get to the changes we needed. As Victor mentioned, we still have a racial leadership gap. And Building Movement Project, which has been an active, Francis Kunreither is an active board member of the Assembly. Their research has shown the race to lead that there is this gap. And we believe that we actually need to support shifting leadership and organizations to really address that. And so leaders need to develop their race equity analysis, center race equity in their work through learning and unlearning, really setting actions and having processes for accountability. And some of the things that I'll share around this is how to prioritize authenticity, trust, and solidarity to interrupt oppression and advance race equity. And our belief is that it's not about positional leadership, that anyone in the sector can redefine, reimagine, and change institutions and systems. And so we really are excited about working with the Assembly and human services organizations to shift how they're approaching that. If we go to the next slide, part of what we're trying to do is think about how do we shift from white dominant norms to behaviors that advance equity and justice. And we know that the human services field is vast, that kind of many of the organizations who are working in communities are really having behaviors that advance equity and justice, but many are maybe trying to make some changes that may have started maybe with more of a charity approach and are in this phase of really trying to revise how they think about leadership and culture. We think about how do we shift from leadership by individual to leadership by collective, shifting our culture norms to not be focused on productivity, but to be people-centered. And human services organizations historically have been very people-centered in the work we do, but also how do we think about that inside of our organizations? To shift from being funding focused to aligning values. And it was so inspiring to hear from the secretary to be in a moment where we really can see alignment of values with resources. But even if that's not the case, how do we consistently come back to our values? And how decisions by those in power actually should be instead be by decisions by those most impacted. So in order to shift these, we need to change individual practices and organizational culture. There is a saying that the longer you swim in a culture, the more invisible it becomes. And we believe that we need to see the water, do temperature checks of the water, and change the water so everyone can swim and play, not just keep their head above the water. And I think this has been something that folks who do work around diversity, equity, inclusion have really struggled with for decades, which is not just about assimilation and people coming in and shifting how they are, but actually how they can thrive and have leadership in organizations. The way that we think about organizational culture is the shared values, attitudes, and practices that characterize an organization, reflecting the organization's values and beliefs. It's the unwritten rule book that determines the way we do things around here. And one of the things that the Assembly is thinking about is how do we support organizations around shifting their culture to make a bigger priority around racial equity and diversity. And this connects directly to leadership practices. So the leadership practices are the mindsets, skills, and behaviors that individuals adopt to lead in organizations. It's the unwritten rulebook that determines the way people act around here. And that's where ProInspire's new research is focused, which is how do we connect leadership practices and organizational culture so we can see how individuals can make changes and how organizations can shift their cultures. Our model, leadership model for race equity impact, really has a set of core beliefs around leadership, as well as how leadership can advance race equity. And so the windows of leadership align to 4 key areas. We think about leadership from self to systems. Leadership of self. We want leaders to focus on understanding identity, reflecting on what has been their lived experience that has shaped them, and bringing that to how they approach their leadership. In leadership of people centering relationships, this goes back to shifting away from a productivity mindset to a people centered mindset, which is how do we actually prioritize trust and the relationships as we think about our leadership, not just the outcomes. And organizations aligning values, that in order for us to lead organizations, we have to be clear what our values are, how race equity, diversity, and inclusion are connected to those, and then really align our work to that. I think that the example that Ruth gave around PurchasingPoint, aligning values includes things like how are we using our dollars to support efforts around greater diversity and racial equity in the suppliers that we work with. And so the fact that we can actually use PurchasingPoint to find those suppliers is a really important way for us to align values. And finally, on leadership of systems is around how do we work together to collectively reimagine our work? And Victor mentioned this early on, but thinking about the human services field as an ecosystem, and we're excited about what we can be doing to bring together players and networks to collectively reimagine. And we think around all these elements of leadership, we have to do active learning and unlearning. So really consistently learning about ourselves, about what's shaped us, and also unlearning things that may not be supportive, to continuously take action and have processes of accountability. And those are part of what we see as core to having leadership that advances race equity. And one of the things that we're trying to do is look at how do we connect our individual practices and organizational culture, because when we hear from leaders like those of you who are on this, so many of you are like, yes, I want to make changes, but my organization isn't there. And we really see them as very connective. As it comes to active learning and unlearning, individuals have to be willing to look at themselves to be a change agent and say, what about me needs to change? And so many people that joined the National Human Services Assembly webinar were really asking that, like, how can I be influencing the change? At the organizational level, the organization has to be willing to unpack and shift culture and think about what are our ways of working that need to change. And many human services organizations have been really reflecting on that in their organizations. In order to take intentional action, operationalizing shifts to how you do things at the interpersonal level. So individually, really thinking about what might need to change. I know for me personally, even as it relates to leading people, centering relationships was something that required some unlearning. I'd been so ingrained to think about productivity and had really had to make some shifts to how I do things at the interpersonal level. And at the organizational level, how do you operationalize changes to norms, policies, and processes from self to systems? This could include everything from how you interact with each other to policies, like how do you look at different suppliers for the things that you're investing in? And from an accountability standpoint, as individuals, following through by taking responsibilities for changes needed, not just in yourself, but in the institution and the system. We really believe that each of us that's part of this ecosystem can make changes. And as organizations, how do we follow through and evaluate our impact on culture, experience, and outcomes? I think a lot of organizations have done a lot of great work around focusing on impact on the outcomes in the community, but also what's the impact on the culture and the experience inside organizations, because we want to make sure that we're aligning values internally, not just externally. And just really excited that so many members of the National Human Services Assembly, as well as the organization overall, are really prioritizing this and look forward to how we can continue to work this, move this forward as a sector.
Thank you, Monisha. I really appreciate that. And let me say that we had a robust conversation at our convening last month around these issues, and a lot of peer learning came out of that. And a lot of the questions that came up about especially how to implement some of these strategies is going to be key as we go forward, because all shoes don't fit all feet. And so we need to continue to have conversations around particularly the accountability, not just what we do, but how are we doing in the things that we're doing. So again, thank you, Monisha. So now we're going to shift to our work around juvenile justice, particularly youth diversion and community-based continuum of care. I'm bringing to you a very important figure in the Assembly's work, Dr. Darlyne Bailey. She is co-vice chair of our board, and the three words that always come to mind when I think about her is that she is a leader, she is an advocate, and she is an expert. In her day job, she's the professor and dean emeritus for Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania. So I'm happy to give it to her so that she can tell you a little bit more about, one, why this issue is so important to us, and two, what we as the Assembly believe is our role in addressing it. So Darlyne.
Thank you, Victor. I'm not sure that all of the PowerPoint's able to be shown at one time, but let me begin by, similarly to Monisha, to just saying that there was a time after I was supposed to roll off the board, after several concurrent terms, I remember actually crying. This was a board I didn't want to leave. And it was many, many years ago, over a decade ago. And then the world shifted, and I was honored to be offered an opportunity to be an officer, which then brought me back and started the clock over. So go figure. I want to just thank everybody for that. And it's perfect for me to be coming on to you right now after Monisha. Monisha just, in ProInspire, just finished some incredible work with an institution that I am honored to chair the board of trustees, taking us through our own diversity work and kind of opening the eyes of the board and opening the eyes of the administration, the president, and the executive working group. It's the ultimate medical academy. And we serve 15 to 16,000 people that look like me, that are also first gen, just like me. And I'm hearing that from the secretary as well. And I'm sure most of us can identify with that. Around the country. It's an online associate's degree granting program in the healthcare world. A perfect time, particularly now. So in my other loved life, Victor told you about what I do in, what I do for kind of my day job. There are lots of other labors of love that I'm sure we're all involved with. And one of them, when I stepped aside after over a quarter of a century of being an academic administrator, either as a dean or provost or acting president, and here at Bryn Mawr College, I created something called the Social Justice Initiative. Someone had told me busy people always stay busy. And so I didn't want to step into nothing. At the risk of using a double negative like Shakespeare. So I didn't quite trust the process that things would emerge. So I pulled together some folks and we started this social justice initiative. And then along comes YAP, the youth advocate programs, and held out their hand and said, would you like to partner with us and actually put together a national convening of like-minded people and even some people that were skeptical in terms of looking at the issue of youth, what we refer to as youth injustice. So let me just tell you how that piece came together. YAP has had over 100 years itself of commitment to this initiative of trying to work hard in advocacy and policy change and in the world of practice as well, to basically close down youth prisons, to reinvest money into communities, to make certain that families and individuals are given the resources that they need in order to reach their highest potential. And the Social Justice Initiative actually has as its vision an opportunity we see to actually find ways to help people understand the roles of what we call the pathways to genuine social justice for everyone, which is around forgiveness, the combination of courage and compassion, paying attention to cultural humility as opposed to cultural competency. We don't believe you can become competent and in terms of understanding another person's culture and way of showing up and social location, but it's an ongoing process that requires you to stay grounded in being humble in who you are and recognizing what you don't know. And last but not least, radical love. And I look forward to the day when we don't have to use the word radical before the word love. So it's a natural fit for these two organizations to come together. And then Victor, you got on board, okay? And we had gone through like, who are we in our next iteration of being after being around for close to 100 years. And when you came on board, it then became a grand triumphant. The three of us were able to get together. The Social Justice Initiative and YAP and the Assembly, or NHSA, or the National Human Services Assembly. And what we wanted to do was to work together for an in-person opportunity of that convening that was originally scheduled. Oh my gosh, we postponed it twice now. And instead, what we decided, and that was called Unlocked, basically unlocking the doors, unlocking also the cells, unlocking our creative juices. Because what can happen when people's minds are in a space, a relatively safe space to be their most creative selves, a lot of beautiful things can happen. So unlocking not just the bars of the prisons, but unlocking ourselves to see hope and possibilities as well. What we decided to do was to create, we were talking about, well, maybe we'll just do 3. Okay, we're now planning number 5 and number 6. But we wanted to host a series of web-based events that would discuss what communities could do to create a robust system of care for one that actually does walk its talk and talk its walk around nurturing and supporting and best serving youth and their families while keeping their communities safe. And that's an important piece to keep in mind as well. So we call these web-based events Unlocked, on the road to Unlocked. The conversations on the road to investing in our children and our communities. So we started out with, by the way, our Hope for Live conference that's been postponed, hopefully will be in April of next year, so please stay tuned. What we did was we decided to have our very first one, focus on looking at the 3 different lenses of practice and policy, as well as lived experience. So that I will tell you 2 things that are going to be constant whenever you come to one of these webinars. First and foremost, there's going to be a theme, and the theme is going to be tied back to, again, I'm not sure how much you can see in the PowerPoint, that's the youth justice lens. There should be a couple of others on there as well. One a little bigger, maybe we can go a little littler to try to get all 3 of them up, and you'll see how they all 3 come together. Great. So what we're trying to talk about is paying attention to not just the policies and the practice and the programs. So the one thing that you'll be guaranteed to hear is about those, but you'll also hear from some of the youth. You hear from youth and their lived experiences inside our injustice system and outside, and how they have been able to use and be, credible messengers and give back from their lived experience to the programs and to the youth in their own communities, to the families in their own communities, and to the communities at large. I'm not going to take us through this one that you're seeing, nor the ones that are below them, but just so that you get a sense that what we're trying to do here, and judging by our turnout of between 200 to 400 people coming to this webinar, we're actually enlightening folks that you too, as an individual, can do something, and you too, as an organization, can recommit to actually put, as Victor said, the humanity back into the work that you're doing, and that you too, judge and lawyers, you can do things to help us work together with social workers to advocate for policy change. So the first one, as I said, focused on what can we do, focusing on practice and policy in communities, particularly given the disproportional harm to Black and Brown youth. The second one focused on restorative practices. We took a look at what are the educational and vocational opportunities that we can pull together to promote safer communities, safer youth, and therefore safer families and lives for everyone involved. And to that one, I just have to give a shout out to my sister friend, Fania Davis, who started Our Joy in Oakland, California. And she brought with her two youth that, I know one of them is probably saying, I thank you for calling me a youth, because I was a youth when I was in the system. Now I'm grown up and I'm out there and actually working with Our Joy. You may recognize Fania Davis's name. She's the sister of Angela Davis, and then went on to get her law degree to actually help her sister during that time. If you remember, some of you may be around my age to remember some of that. And our third panel actually took a look at what can the larger system do to create a more just world for everyone. So we had a discussion about the larger system, not just in terms of organizations, but how do we begin to mobilize communities? How do we begin to amplify the voices, believing that everybody has a voice? How do we find ways to amplify them even beyond their neighborhoods into the courthouses, into the world of federal policy? Hearing our secretary speak this morning or this afternoon, as soon as we launched, was very inspiring, very encouraging, very motivating, and just reaffirmed that we're on the right path to making some good trouble. Our fourth panel focused on the unique needs of girls in our youth injustice system, and focused also on the LGBTQ plus lifestyles as well, and paying attention to the differential and very tragic lack of care that we usually find behind the bars of folks that identify as being girls and that identify as being part of the LGBTQ plus world. So that's a little bit about what we did and what we're planning on doing. And these slides are to show you just some, and you'll get copies of this. Thank you, Victor. But to show you the different areas that we're paying attention to. We're paying attention to wanting to rebalance where monies actually flow, where dollars actually flow, where attention actually flows, and grounding that yet one more time back into the families, back into our communities for safe worlds for us all. We're looking in October to have our fifth webinar. It's planned for a closer look at community trauma and what do we mean by community trauma? What do we mean by mental health issues, the growing number of suicides? I believe our secretary referred to that as well. And we're going to be then early 2022, as we get closer to the April hope for in person, we're going to be looking at more healing informed practices based on trauma practice. And how do we then begin to talk about what needs to happen at an individual level with the individualized services, and what needs to happen in our communities so that our communities can wrap themselves around our youth and wrap themselves around our families to actually become more healing informed. Some of us refer to this as trauma informed. We like to talk about it as healing informed, so that we can actually put in place some of what we've learned to reduce the mental dis-ease of folks and actually increase people's sense of agency and purpose. When we know why we're here and we are able to be seen, that's when sheer magic can happen. So speaking of sheer magic, I would say that there's really very little that cannot be accomplished when you pull the right people together around shared values. If you think about any relationship, even the relationship that we may have with an individual, we can have different reasons for being in the world, but when we share core values, those differences start to drift off, and we actually can create that good trouble together. We can actually, in this case, between the National Human Services Assembly and the Social Justice Initiative at Bryn Mawr College and our now international YAP, what we can do is actually pull together the hearts and the minds, the hands and the feet of everybody that's impacted by our juvenile injustice system. Again, good trouble, holding ourselves accountable, and sheer magic. So thank you, Victor, for an opportunity. Thank you for being our leader and being with us on this journey. And thank you, everybody, for really paying attention to what we're doing as your assembly, this being one of our projects, one of our initiatives. And yes, as the Secretary said, hold us accountable. Join us and hold us accountable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darlyne. Very important work. Again, it's really about preparing what they say, a table for our young people who, quite honestly, are our future, and in many ways, they are our present. So I want to shift us now. It's again, these are just brief brief overviews of what we're about. It goes so much deeper. There's so much more rich content that is happening in the meetings as they take place throughout the year. But I also want to give some space to our public policy work, which it covers multiple areas. But I thought that it would be very important to bring forward one of our key partners in our policy area, John Maki, who's the Director of Innovations Alliance for Safety and Justice. And, I just love his title because I mentioned earlier that we not only need to be inspirational, but we need to also be innovators. And we have an opportunity, again, with the American Rescue Plan to build on that innovation. So he's going to talk to you a little bit about what's happening in that area. I'm sure you've heard so much about it, but in some ways it can be hard to navigate. So I'm glad that we have such an expert like John to help us through that navigation. So at this point, I will stop sharing my screen, and John, you can go ahead and share yours.
Awesome, thank you so much. All right, so let me try to share my screen here. Always fun here. Okay, first do this. Okay. All right, so everyone can see my screen, correct? Or I can't see the chat now. Okay, wonderful.
That is correct.
Okay, so first, let me just say it is such an honor to be with you today. I'm humbled and just always excited to hear about the real work that's going on in communities throughout the country. So I'm here to today talk about a really important resource opportunity, the American Rescue Plan. And in particular, so I'll get into it, it's about potential kind of extra pay called premium pay that essential human workers are eligible for work they've done during the pandemic. First, a little bit about the Alliance for Safety and Justice, my organization. We're a multi-state organization, work with states across the country to do two things. One, to reduce a harmful over-reliance on incarceration and the collateral consequences that attend that, and also to expand victim services. And so we have two kind of primary community organizing initiatives that spearhead that work. One is the Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. This is an organizing project that works with people who've experienced or been affected by violence across the country, almost 50,000 people. And we help them to train them, pay them to, or support them to advocate for themselves, to use their stories, use their experiences to drive change, and also to expand the sense of what we think about who gets to be a victim. Historically, mass incarceration largely has defined victim, in terms of who's innocent, or typically this will break down into white victims, and really ignore the profound level of trauma and victimization that occurs in communities throughout the country. Our other initiative is Time Done. It's a similar kind of community organizing initiative that works with people with past criminal convictions to advocate for the automatic relief of these records. You know, for most people who have criminal records, sometimes going back decades, if there is relief available, they have to advocate it for themselves. They have to go through a very laborious and burdensome process. We think this process should be automatic, that people, once their punishment is done, their time is done, they should have no record and they should have no barriers. So our work for most of our history has really been based at the state level. And that's really where, the criminal justice system is really the strongest. But after COVID, of course, so much attention has focused to the federal government, and we knew there was going to be an important set of sources of resources coming out of the federal government. So in 2020, we launched the National Coalition for Shared Safety. This is a group of service providers that really are focused on the critical services, the essential services that communities in crisis need. And so with that coalition, we advocate for federal resources and changes in policy. As the secretary said, this is this is a moment of great despair in many ways, but also a moment of great hope and possibility. And I completely agree. I don't think we've seen a moment like this since the early 60s, where the paradigm is shifting, and it's being backed up by a lot of money, a lot of resources, which is really the only thing that really can make change happen, right? So we've moved from a level, I think, just of mere talk to a level of real investment. So just a quick highlight of some of the things that's happening right now. Of course, we have the American Rescue Plan, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. Historic investment, $1.9 trillion. That includes just a massive amount of resources for human services, and in particular, community-based violence intervention. So there's money in there for underserved victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. There's grant programs that'll be coming out soon for behavioral health needs. There's a really, really exciting change for Medicaid-funded community-based mobile crisis intervention services to help people who otherwise might find themselves in jails, prisons, or ERs to treat them in the community. There's a provision for Department of Education to fund community-based violence intervention services. And finally, and this is what we're talking about for the rest of this presentation, there's a massive investment in state and local recovery funds. But along with that, that's cash already going out to states across the country, resources going out through, across the country. There's also the current reconciliation bill that's being worked out. Again, another historic opportunity. In this bill, there is a large multi-billion-dollar investment in community violence-based intervention. In many ways historic, potentially paradigm shifting. And also the Biden administration is leveraging existing grant programs. One, again, to kind of broaden the sense of who can apply for them, what kinds of populations they can serve. So even in programs that probably many of you have worked with before, at the federal level, they're being looked at in a new and really exciting way. But like I said, we're here today mainly to talk about the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds in the ARP. This is $350 billion. With a B, billion, that is going to state government, or that has gone to state governments, mayors, counties, to do a handful of core things. The first is to respond to COVID-19 and the public health emergency it's caused. The other one is to respond to the negative economic impact. And in particular, this is in the law, this includes nonprofits. So any nonprofit that's been negatively economically impacted by COVID, and that could be just through an increase in service demands or a decrease in funding, you've been economically impacted, and these resources are designed or intended for you. And finally, a really exciting, I think under noticed provision, is to provide premium pay to eligible essential workers. So before I begin, I want to just give a highlight of like what these funds, like what kind of criteria these funds need for them to kind of be used. So the first thing that's really important is that the vision of the ARP is, it's grounded in public health, really historic. I'll say one thing: when this first bill came out, or when this bill first came out, the first thing I did was to look for where the Department of Justice was. Typically, when the federal government, really any government, spends money, when it thinks about violence, when it thinks about issues around social disadvantage, the criminal justice system is one of the primary ways that it spends money, and it just gets that money. And usually, organizations like yours or mine, we have to think about, okay, how do we fit within that framework? How do we participate within this system to bring resources that aren't merely punitive? Well, the American Rescue Plan didn't have any mandated spending for the criminal justice system. And when I was reading the bill, I honestly thought there was like a missing page or two. So this is historic. And what's more, not only did it not have any mandated investments within the criminal justice system, it really, I've never seen a kind of like a federal spending plan that highlighted the importance of public health, that highlighted equity. And so this is a different kind of vision for the federal government. Now, in that vision, a lot of it is shifted. It shifts discretion to the state and local level. So all that is to say, the vision is beautiful. I think it's what our country needs. But all of the stuff that I just said, the over-reliance on the criminal justice system can certainly come in and will come in through state and local government discretion without our advocacy, without the insistence of organizations just like yours to say, you know, we've had enough of over-reliance on incarceration, over-policing. We need resources for communities that aren't punitive. So those are two big things to think about as I walk through the rest of the presentation. So one thing, and I can't see the chat, so this was kind of a misguided thing, but I do want you just to all think about, I'd be curious, at the end you'll get my email. How many have you heard about premium pay from the American Rescue Plan? And if you have heard about it, I would love to know by email or chat, you know, have you advocated for it? Or have you heard about advocacy for it? And if you haven't heard about it, that's okay, because I'll be talking about it right now. So again, just before I jump into the premium pay, just kind of high level criteria on what activates this spending. So there's two basic ways in which expenses become eligible for these recovery funds. First, you have to identify a need or a negative impact that COVID has had. And you might know there are quotes here, and I'm quoting from the administrative guidance from the Department of the Treasury. So this is just I'm pulling from the most important authority here. So first, the expense has to identify a need or impact. That could be violence, that could be mental health issues, housing, poverty. I mean, basically any issue that has been caused or exacerbated by COVID. That's the first thing. And the second thing is the expense has to somehow address that. So once you've done that, you are now eligible for ARP funds. And the great thing there is that all the work you do is certainly eligible for these resources. The bad thing, I suppose, is that a lot of other things are too. And because of the vast discretion that state and local governments have over these funds, you know, we're going to be fighting with, or wrestling with a lot of other entities, businesses, schools, et cetera, which are really important. But it's to say that all of your organization, anyone who does human service work, has a strong claim on these funds. All right, so premium pay, what is it? Premium pay is, I first want to just outline some key features and then go into how a lot of your workers are eligible for these for this service. So first, premium pay is additional income. All right, that's really important. It's additional. It's not to replace income. It is extra pay. It is a pay. And this is the limits of it. It's up to $13 an hour, not per worker, not to exceed $25,000 altogether per person. As I noted, in no way can it substitute like someone's regular income. The Treasury that wrote the rules for these funds encourages the retrospective award for essential workers. In other words, for essential workers that started working, you know, like more than a year ago, any time they spend that's eligible is eligible for these funds, and the Treasury encourages that. Especially for folks who, so let's say you've already given extra pay for people who've done work during the pandemic, they're still eligible for premium pay, but the Treasury encourages folks who have not received extra pay. And again, I want to make a really, really strong point. So this is authorized by the American Rescue Plan, but it is not mandated. It is not required. So in order to get this pay, we're gonna have to advocate for it. Okay, so here are some. Let me just move my screen here so I can see what I'm looking at. Oops. Sorry, 1 second here. Okay, so what are the key eligibility criteria? So the way the American Rescue Plan and the Treasury defines essential workers, it's a work that has been relied on to maintain the continuity of essential essential critical infrastructure sectors. And I think this is really the key point, that are critical to protecting the health and well-being of their communities. And on top of that, the Treasury lists, specific kinds of services. And basically that would include anyone on this call: public health, safety, healthcare, social services, childcare, human services. That's actually listed. So on top of that, your governor, your mayor may have declared another industry, another field of work essential. But as long as they're kind of doing that key thing of protecting the health and well-being, they are eligible for these funds. Okay, so how can you receive this pay? So you're eligible. Let's say that you've had workers in your organization that were in the community during the pandemic. They were doing their normal work. They were working with people. They were putting themselves in harm's way. Getting COVID or potentially getting COVID. How can they get these funds? First of all, these funds can be the governor. These are all funds that are more or less controlled by either the state, local executive. Sometimes, the state and local legislature may also, through their appropriation power, kind of say we want to see these funds go to these purposes. And to actually get these funds, there's two mechanisms. One is that the funds can be placed within a state or state or local agency, a government agency, and they can make the grants. But also, and this is really critical, and I suspect a lot of your organizations could do this, the grants can actually be made to the organizations whose workers did this work, right? So you can get a grant, an ARP recovery grant, to pay for your employers or your employees, contractors, to actually pay this work. All right. So how can you advocate for this? Like I said, this is not, in no way is this mandated. You have to advocate for this. So as I said, there's two really key entities. The most important one are the chief executives at the state and local level. The ARP vests, that's where most of the discretion lies. So sometimes, when you advocate to your governor, your mayor, your county board chief executive, they might try to say, no, I can't control that. That has to go here. That has to go there. I promise you, this is within their power. They may not want to do it. They may have other priorities, but they have the power to use their pretty huge allocations for this purpose. As I noted, the legislature, your state local legislatures, like aldermen, county board council, state legislators, through their appropriation processes, they can also condition the funds. They can also place a mandate on the fund. So they can say, we are appropriating these funds to go for these purposes. I would say in my experience, legislators tend not to do that with federal funds. They will typically, in their appropriation power, will just say something like, we appropriate, these funds to do these purposes, and that's kind of it. So we'll see though. But again, I would say what's really important here is the way to think about this money is this is political money, meaning that it will be determined politically at the state and local level. So when you think about who are your allies? Do you have an ally in the governor's office? Do you have a key member in the legislature who has influence over the budget making? Those are folks who can help you achieve this. So as Victor noted, I put out a blog post that you should have all received in your newsletter that kind of walks through some of this. We have a new report at Alliance for Safety and Justice called Rewarding Service. It walks through probably at greater detail what I just went through, and it includes some boilerplate language that was designed for you to just take up, repurpose, and use it to advocate for these resources. Here's some more, and we'll send this PowerPoint out afterwards. Key resources, including publication that my organization has done. And lastly, I guess two things. Here's my email. I would love to hear from you, love to just brainstorm about how to get these resources. And two, I think along with getting these resources, this is all an opportunity for the country to recognize the kind of heroic work that you've all done. I mean, I'm a policy guy. During COVID, I've been sheltering in place. I've been very concerned for my health of my family, my own health. I know you and your staff throughout the country, you've put yourself in harm's way. You are heroes, and this money is for you. So thank you very much. Look forward to any questions and comments you have over email or chat.
Thank you so much, John. If you don't mind giving me back the ability to share my screen.
There you go.
Thank you, my friend. And here we go. So no, that was extremely important information. You said you couldn't see the comments in the chat, but as we were monitoring, a lot of people were very happy and thankful of the way you were breaking it down, because it can be very confusing. And just so because a couple of questions came up, we will be sharing all of the materials. Again, this is being recorded live. It will be on our YouTube page, the entire meeting, but we will also post links to the materials on our website in the coming days. So fret not. So again, thank you, John. That was great. Very important, very timely, and it really points to a direction that we at the Assembly can help our members and our partners in any way that we can. Because as you mentioned, there's some local and regional advocacy efforts that are needed that we may be able to help our folks get behind. So with that, I want to turn it back over to Jeff, who wants to make a special acknowledgement for someone who's very important. I won't go into it. I'll let Jeff do more of that. But I can tell you personally, the person that we're recognizing has made a major impact in my ability to step into this role and to quote unquote hit the ground running, and made it so much easier, especially in a virtual environment, because I've yet to meet in some cases many of the folks that are on this call and who are listening in cyberspace. And so in and of itself, that can be very difficult. But the person that we're acknowledging has been at the forefront, if not one of the few, voices and faces from the very beginning that's helped me grasp a little bit more about what this role is about. So Jeff, I'll take it over to you.
Thanks, Vic. And is Adolf back on? He was called away. So I don't know. He said he's going to try to get back.
He actually is not on, but
okay.
I think.
Okay, so we'll go ahead.
He'll see it later.
But we'll have to give him his actual recognition at another time. But I'll talk to our membership and other guests about Adolf Falcone, the Vice President of the Alliance for Hispanic Health. I don't think I've been now as a chair for 2 years and a member for about 15 years. And I really can't think of one person who's contributed more to the Assembly over the years, and especially in the last couple of years, than Adolf. He stepped in at a moment of transition for the Assembly. Which way we're going, how we're going to get there during some very crucial times regarding our direction. And Adolf stepped in, helped us to really build back our resources. He created new processes and systems to manage our group. He's offered space with his organization so that we're co-residing at a new address. He's come in and worked with our staff before Victor has come on to really reorganize our whole computer system and payroll and proposals and contracting, finances. And he's also was our leader at a time of transition and doubt and introspection. Adolf stepped up. He showed up with resources and his knowledge. I've been in the business now for almost 50 years in the human service sector, and I've never met anyone as smart and as bright and as resourceful as Adolf Falcone. So I just want to acknowledge Adolf's leadership over these many years, but particularly the last few years, and his contribution to the Assembly. And hopefully he'll see this and feel proud and good as he has worked hard for the Assembly and for the human service sector. So congratulations, Adolf. We'll see you soon. And we wouldn't be here without you today. So thank you. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Adolf, for everything.
And that's it for here. Vic?
Yep. Thank you, Jeff. Again, it goes without saying that my first few months here have gone as smoothly as they possibly could because of the transition, the time, the care, the dedication that Adolf has put into the organization prior to me arriving and then post my arrival. So with that being said, we're almost at time. And I want to be very respectful of everyone. Again, thanking all of you for taking the time out today to join us here for our annual meeting. Again, looking forward to in the days to come of meeting you in person as the country opens back up and we do what we need to do to get in front of each other again. But I did want to close on, I started off saying that, my comments were going to be centered around where the assembly has been, where we are now, and where we hope to be going forward. So I'd say what's on the horizon for us tomorrow. Quite frankly, and quite simply, you've heard a lot about what we're doing. We want to continue those initiatives and continue to be a voice and a leverager of voices and a community partner, a thought leader. When it comes directly to our membership, again, expanding the tent. What does that mean? How can we be of value? How can we be of service to other organizations? What are multiple points of entry and engagement with the assembly? Everybody is not into public policy. All people may not be into youth justice. There might be, other organizations that have other issues, and we want to provide a platform for multiple conversations within our strategic priorities. Again, we want to champion diversifying leadership throughout the sector. This is the day, this is the time. And in fact, we're probably way late in this work because when the people that we're serving, and ultimately, while we are an organization that supports other organizations, we never lose sight of the end goal, which is to better the lives of our fellow citizens, our neighbors, our fellow residents. And so we need to diversify leadership. And what does that mean? That's a whole host of things. It's not just racial. It's not just orientation. It's not just gender. It's also in thought. There's a generational gap that we want to, talk about. How do we get more younger people in positions of leadership so that we can hear their voices? And do it in a collective way. For our members and for our partners, we want to provide more collective yet customized experiences as much as we can. Thankfully we're a powerful team, but yet we are still small, and hopefully we will be growing as the days come. And so we do want to make sure that we're meeting the specific needs of many of our members as they rise in an aggregate manner. We also want to continue to build on our policy and educational platform. And again, what we're hoping to do in that manner is using our electronic communications, looking at our website to become a hub of activity. This is part of that process. Again, we're going to be posting the not just this whole meeting, but the materials on our website. But as we build that out in the future, that will be also a place where you can get information and education about all the things that we are working on. So with that, I would say, it's been an honor, to participate not just in this meeting, but to be in this role. I look at it from a personal professional standpoint as an opportunity to join other leaders in doing what is near and dear to my heart. I love the health and human services sector. I love working in the nonprofit sector. Again, it's allowing me, to provide my energy, expertise to the service of other folks. But at the same time, this is the vehicle that I choose, and that has chosen me. Those who know me best know that I speak in terms of, I try to stay in my lane and let the universe bring me to where my purpose lies. And I believe that this is the place and this is the time and these are the people for doing so. So I'm honored. I am glad. I've got a crack team of professionals. I want to thank them for helping put this together in a very short and condensed way. I want to thank all of my board members and all of the supporters and the partners like John, who have contributed not just to this meeting, but to all of the learnings and all of the collaborations in the past, and thanking you in advance for the future. And with that, if Jeff, you want to take us out on any particular note, I look forward to seeing all of you. I look forward to hearing from many of you who want to join the meeting, who want to join the assembly. Be happy to talk to you about that. And also looking forward to speaking to those who have resources that can help us move our agenda forward. We think we have a great plan. We think we've got great people, and we obviously have a great purpose.
Yeah, thanks, Vic. And just thank you to you. We're really thrilled to have you aboard as our new leader these past 8, or actually less than that. And we also want your crack staff and Ruth and Michelle and Melissa and others that have really stepped up to really form. And most of all, our board of directors who really helped through this transition and really strengthened the assembly and our mission, and are committed to working the next few years to make the sector strong. And as the secretary says, to rage and to join the secretary in raging and organizing for a better community, a better nation of communities with more equity and justice. So thank you, everyone. And my last message is join us. Maybe you want to be a board member. Maybe you want to be a member of an organization. Maybe you want to just learn more about us. Call us. Anyone of the board members will take a call. Vic and his staff will take your calls. We really want to expand the umbrella. And this is an exciting time to be in a coalition of human service providers. There's not many other organizations that really focus on the human service sector to strengthen it and make it even better than it is now. And like I mentioned, almost 50 years in the sector, I think we can play an even greater role than we've ever played in our history. This is the time, this is the moment for organizations, community organizations to come together to make the difference, to rage. So thank you, everyone, and be safe out there. And we'll see you at our next convening. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you
Take
all.
care, everyone.